Hello, Gino here, and you are listening to Otherworld Connections. We live in a critical time where now, more than ever, angels and fairies, hidden forces, are bursting at the seams of the veil to work with us. They want to see us change in order to save the world and live in service to others. So join me on a journey to empowerment and enlightenment with an angelic angle and a fairy focus, looking into ways to improve our current situation, morality, archetypes, solutions for self-healing, and spiritual sciences in light of theosophy and other occult traditions. Hello, welcome back to Otherworld Connections. Keeping it gangster since about 5 weeks ago. Oh, it's good to be back, and today we're going to explore another fairy tale, because I'm surprised at myself. I'm surprised that the allegory of these fairy tales, by researching into symbolism, they have some really, important meanings, some universal meanings. And in my opinion, that is why they're still around, and that was also why they were written. And so we're going to keep it alive. We're going to keep these fairy tales alive. We're going to do a message from our traveling companions. We are having a bizarre message from the She. And we are just doing that internal work. That's what we're doing, because that's how we're going to fix things. We're going to fix ourselves. We all know about what's going on in the world, and if you want to keep up to date with that, check out all the amazing hosts right here on revolution.radio. So let's look at the Golden Goose. Okay, I'm going to read it. It's going to take about 14 minutes. So buckle up. There was once a man who had 3 sons. The youngest of them was called Dullhead, and was sneered and jeered at and snubbed on every possible opportunity. One day it happened that the eldest son wished to go into the forest to cut wood. And before he started, his mother gave him a fine, rich cake and a bottle of wine. What a legendary mother. So that he might be sure not to suffer from hunger or thirst. When he reached the forest, he met a little old grey man who wished him good morning and said, "Do give me a piece of that cake you have got in your pocket, and let me have a draught of your wine. I am so hungry and thirsty." But this clever son replied, "If I give you my cake and wine, I shall have none left for myself. You just go your own way." And he left the little man standing there and went further on into the forest. There he began to cut down a tree. But before long he made a false stroke with his axe, and cut his own arm so badly that he was obliged to go home and have it bound up. Then the second son went to the forest, and his mother gave him a good cake and a bottle of wine, as she had to his elder brother. He too met the little old grey man, who begged him for a morsel of cake and a draught of wine. But the second son spoke most sensibly too, and said, "Whatever I give you, I deprive myself of. Just go your own way, will you?" Not long after his punishment overtook him, for no sooner had he struck a couple of blows on a tree with his axe than he cut his leg so badly that he had to be carried home. So then Dullhead said, "Father, let me go out and cut wood." But his father answered, "Both your brothers have injured themselves. You had better leave it alone. You know nothing about it." But Dullhead begged so hard to be allowed to go that at last his father said, "Very well then, go. Perhaps when you have hurt yourself, you may learn to know better." His mother only gave him a very plain cake, made with water and baked in the cinders, and a bottle of sour beer. When he got to the forest, he too met the little grey old man, who greeted him and said, "Give me a piece of your cake and a draught from your bottle. I am so hungry and thirsty." And Dullhead replied, "I've only got a cinder cake and some sour beer. But if you care to have that, let us sit down and eat." So they sat down, and when Dullhead brought out his cake, he found it had turned into a fine, rich cake, and the sour beer into excellent wine. Then they ate and drank, and when they had finished, the little man said, "Now I will bring you luck, because you have a kind heart and are willing to share what you have with others. There stands an old tree. Cut it down, and amongst its roots you'll find something." With that, the little man took leave. Then Dullhead fell to at once to hew down the tree, and when it fell, he found amongst its roots a goose whose feathers were all of pure gold. He lifted it out, carried it off, and took it with him to an inn where he meant to spend the night. Now the landlord of the inn had 3 daughters, and when they saw the goose they were filled with curiosity as to what this wonderful bird could be, and each longed to have one of its golden feathers. The eldest thought to herself, "No doubt I shall soon find a good opportunity to pluck out one of its feathers." And the first time Dullhead happened to leave the room, she caught hold of the goose by its wing. But, lo and behold, her fingers seemed to stick fast to the goose, and she could not take her hand away. Soon after, the second daughter came in, and thought to pluck a golden feather for herself too. But hardly had she touched her sister than she stuck fast as well. At last the third sister came with the same intentions, but the other 2 cried out, "Keep off! For heaven's sake, keep off!" The younger sister could not imagine why she was to keep off, and thought to herself, "If they are both there, why should I not be there too?" So she sprang to them. But no sooner had she touched one of them than she stuck fast to her. So they all 3 had to spend the night with the goose. Next morning, Dullhead tucked the goose under his arm and went off, without in the least troubling himself about the 3 girls who were hanging on to it. They just had to run after him right or left as best they could. In the middle of a field they met the parson, and when he saw this procession he cried, "For shame, you bold girls! What do you mean by running after a young fellow through the fields like that? Do you call that proper behaviour?" And with that he caught the youngest girl by the hand to try and draw her away. But directly he touched her, he hung on himself, and had to run along with the rest of them. Not long after the clerk came that way, and was much surprised to see the parson following the footsteps of the 3 girls. "Why, where is your reverence going so fast?" cried he. "Don't forget there is to be a christening today." And he ran after him, caught him by the sleeve, and hung on to it himself. As the 5 of them trotted along in this fashion, one after the other, 2 peasants were coming from their work with their hoes. On seeing them, the parson called out and begged them to come rescue him and the clerk. But no sooner did they touch the clerk than they stuck on to, and so there were 7 of them running after Dullhead and his goose. After a time they all came to a town where a king reigned, whose daughter was so serious and solemn that no one could ever manage to make her laugh. So the king had decreed that whoever should succeed in making her laugh should marry her. When Dullhead heard this, he marched before the princess with his goose and its appendages. And as soon as she saw that these 7 people continually running after each other, she burst out laughing and could not stop herself. Then Dullhead claimed her as his bride, but the king, who did not much fancy him as a son-in-law, made all sorts of objections, and told him he must first find a man who could drink up a whole cellarful of wine. Dullhead bethought him of the little grey man, who could, he felt sure, help him. So he went off to the forest, and on the very spot where he had cut down the tree, he saw a man sitting with the most dismal expression of face. Dullhead asked him what he was taking so much to heart, and the man answered, "I don't know how I am ever to quench this terrible thirst I am suffering from. Cold water doesn't suit me at all. To be sure, I've emptied a whole barrel of wine, but what is 1 drop on a hot stone?" "I think I can help you," said Dullhead. "Come with me, and you shall drink to your heart's content." So he took him to the king's cellar, and the man sat down before the huge casks and drank till he drank up the whole contents of the cellar before the day closed. Then Dullhead asked once more for his bride. But the king felt vexed at the idea of a stupid fellow, whom people called Dullhead, carrying off his daughter, and he began to make fresh conditions. He required Dullhead to find a man who could eat a mountain of bread. Dullhead did not wait to consider long, but went straight off to the forest. And there on the same spot sat a man who was drawing in a strap as tight as he could round his body, and making a most woeful face the while. Said he, "I've eaten up a whole oven full of loaves, but what's the good of that to anyone who is as hungry as I am? I declare my stomach feels quite empty, and I must draw my belt tight if I'm not to die of starvation." Dullhead was delighted, and said, "Get up and come with me, and you shall have plenty to eat." And he brought him to the king's court. Now the king had given orders to have all the flour in his kingdom brought together, and to have a huge mountain baked of it. But the man from the wood just took up his stand before the mountain and began to eat, and in one day it had all vanished. For the 3rd time Dullhead asked for his bride, but again the king tried to make some evasion, and demanded a ship which could sail on land or water. "When you come sailing in such a ship," said he, "you shall have my daughter without further delay." Again Dullhead started off to the forest, and there he found the little old grey man with whom he had shared his cake, and who said, "I have eaten and I have drunk for you, and now I will give you the ship. I have done all this for you because you are kind and merciful to me." Then he gave Dullhead a ship which could sail on land or water, and when the king saw it, he felt he could no longer refuse him his daughter. So they celebrated the wedding with great rejoicings, and after the king's death, Dullhead succeeded to the kingdom and lived happily with his wife for many years after. The end. Okay, so let's look at this story, and the first thing I want to say that springs to mind is the obvious part that we notice in a lot of these fairy tales, or almost all of them, is this, being kind and not being kind. And, in this one, the first 2 brothers, they injured themselves because the story's inferring that they weren't kind to the old grey man who was hungry. Now that is that is, what am I trying to say here? Not directly the lesson. In my opinion, they include that in a lot of these stories for the children, and not in a way that the children aren't capable of figuring that out for themselves. But in my opinion, I think it's the repetition of that in the stories drills it in, hits it home, that it becomes, yeah, of course I know that. And it highlights that is important as a first thing. That's what I'm trying to say, as a first thing. That it's not the totality of the story, but it's the first thing of a lot of these stories. It's like it's a principle to really resonate, well, not quite that word, but the law of vibration, that we're all connected, to acknowledge other people. It's not about giving your stuff away for no reason, but it's about acknowledging that there is a dynamic, that we are all connected, and that if one suffers, all suffer. So it's not about speaking to children or trying to, indoctrinate children into a certain way of behavior. I think it's just the repetition of these fairy tales having that value on the outside at the beginning. It's just a repetition of that is a principle in life before everything else. Because that is also how evil reveals itself to you. And it's unfortunate we live in a society where we're kind of not allowed in a way to stand up to evil, because we live in an evil society. Nevertheless, these fairy tales were written, I assume, before it was a fully evil society. Maybe the communities were not. Maybe the communities were free. Okay, so there's that. I wanted to get out of the way. So let's look at the symbolism and come up with the allegory, what this means. So the number 3, the 3 brothers. Well, I just want to say about the number 3 is that 3 represents the mind, body, and spirit, which make up the man, threefold nature in the human being. And 3 also stands for self-expression. And number 3 represents also the creative principle in God. So it's related to creation, and then it's related to self-expression. So my opinion is that is the basis of these stories that have the 3 this and 3 that. It's about coming into holistic intelligence, coming into the whole holistic human being, doing your great work, doing the thing that you were born, that you were brought here, or you came here to do, and doing, God's work, or doing something creative, expressing yourself, your true self here, in line with or in recognition of the Creator or creation. I believe that that's foundational to some of these stories that mention 3 brothers. So the king represents, I'm just going to go obvious and say, like the Emperor card in the tarot, the man who has internal monarchy, looking at that as positively as possible, masculine energy, Emperor energy, man who has control of himself and control of his environment for the greater good, that kind of thing. And ultimately, the story is about the kingdom, the kingship, and the king is looking for a ruler. So anyway, let's look at the Golden Goose. The Golden Goose, well, that, let's be really like basic here. Golden Goose stands for like good fortune, right? Wealth. But we're looking at this as, internal development and that sort of thing. So it's protection and good fortune. Okay. And the 3 daughters. Well, daughters, if we look allegorically for, what daughters mean in a fairy tale, well, my opinion is that it's like feminine energy. And 3 daughters, well, we could attribute the 3 daughters to 3 different aspects of, the sacred feminine. And that could be probably a lot of things, but just at having a stab at it, receptivity, creativity, and intuition. Those are feminine things that are important. And so the 3 daughters got stuck to the Golden Goose. So for protection and good fortune, which is really like a success in your life and going the right direction without too much stopping you, right? Because you're protected and you have good luck and that sort of thing. Well, you need receptivity, creativity, and intuition to reach the Godhead, to reach the kingship. To have that internal rulership, you need to integrate feminine aspects of receptivity, creativity, and intuition. The parson, which is a priest of a non-denominational parish or church, represents connection to the sacred or the spiritual. And he was stuck to the Golden Goose. So for protection and good fortune, on your way to your holistic development or your achieving your Godhead, you need to be connected to the spiritual. And the clerk, again being rudimentary, is being accountable. Self-accountability. And the clerk was stuck to the goose. So for protection and good fortune, you need self-accountability. You need to be responsible. You need to take responsibility. And the 2 peasants with hoes, I was kind of reaching here. I looked a lot into hoe symbolism. But hey, intelligence and integrity. So that's a little bit deeper because there were 2. And 2 is about integration and balance as well. So being smart and true. So you need intelligence and integrity. And those 2 peasants were stuck to the Golden Goose too. So these are all aspects these are all qualities. These are all things that we need to be working with and in contact with to take rulership of ourselves. And if we use all of these qualities that we as humans can tap into and flex, we will be protected and have good fortune. We'll be all right. We'll be looked after. But before we get to become the king in life, before we get to be the king internally, there are 3 more things to do. One is the man drinking all the wine. That was a task, one of 3 tasks. And drinking all the wine, well, that symbolizes the expression of feelings. When you get really drunk, you lose your inhibition and you start sharing what you really feel. Expression of feelings, very important. Okay, so that's to do with the emotions, right? And then you have to find the man that eats all the bread, which symbolizes you need to find the physical needs. You need to meet your physical needs. So you need to work on the physical body. You need your self-esteem. So, because the bread symbolizes sustenance, right? And eating all the bread speaks to something greater than sustenance, right? Nutrition and, like a wholesome kind of thing. So your physical, so this is to do with the physical, so you need to meet your physical needs and have self-esteem for the correct actions. And then the final task in the story was to find the sailing ship that could sail on land and sea, which means to find the best sailing ship that has the most access everywhere. Well, that is to do with the mind. The ship sits on top of the water, which symbolize the emotions. The mind on top of the emotions, the thoughts. You have to have a positive mental outlook. So the sailing ship, finding the sailing ship means you have to find a positive mental outlook. And those three things unlock the kingdom. So that's your thoughts, emotions, and actions, otherwise known as the trivium process, or the outcome of the trivium process, where your thoughts, emotions, and actions are all working harmoniously. So how cool is that? That's another story that just really ties up. So the key in that story again was the number 3. And that concludes the fairy tale segment as a gateway to your internal kingdom. Read fairy tales to young children, if possible. Read these ones, now that you know what they really mean. So you, by way of transference, pass the allegory on to young children, and they can decode it when they grow up, when they're able to decode things. All right, traveling companions. A little message from our angels. To stake your claim in the world, you must restore a balance in the material and spiritual. You must be authentic. Have a quiet time, a good night's rest. Believe you are a winner. Be confident. Look ahead and continue on. Accept that your success is inevitable. Be patient. Be emotionally detached from those who are non-supportive of your authentic self. May you be blessed with prosperity. Well, there you go. That's how to do it. That is how to stake your claim in the world. It's true. Oh my gosh. So many obstacles in our way. This is the 3rd time that a good night's rest has popped up as part of like being successful, or just finding your way or getting to where you want to go. Oh, something to keep working on, everybody. Oh my goodness. Good night's sleep, super important. Hammering it home here on Otherworld Connections. Go to sleep. Being emotionally detached from those who are non-supportive of your authentic self, that's a roadblock. People don't want you to succeed. You got to be ruthless there. Patch things up later. Or not, Anyway, tagging on to that, we are going to look at How to Eliminate Negative Thinking by Derek Borthwick. A book published just a couple of years ago in 2022. This one is interesting. This one's, here we go. Using goals for eliminating negative thinking. Suppose that our goal is to never have a negative thought again. Because, going back to the reading, believe you are a winner. and accept that your success is inevitable means doing away with the negative thoughts related to your goals and achieving and winning, succeeding. So you have to accept your success is inevitable and believe you are a winner, which is kind of otherwise known as eliminating negative thinking. Okay, so suppose our goal is never to have a negative thought again. First of all, this is unrealistic, impractical, and could even be a dangerous goal. After all, if somebody asked us to jump off a building, negative thoughts would prevent a potentially disastrous experience. Okay. Our main goal could be to have greater control over our thoughts. Here we are focusing on the process and not the outcome as defined by numbers. ABC of goals. There are 3 essential features of goals as established by Frank L. Small, a psychologist from Washington University. He discovered that the most effective goals are A. Achievable, B. Believable, C. Committed. SMART goals. If you work in business, then you will more than likely have come across SMART goals previously. SMART is an acronym, and the letters stand for S. Specific, M. Measurable, A. Achievable, R. Realistic, T. Time-bound. The key point is to take action, to start the process. Procrastination only delays this as time slips by, and a feeling of underachievement ensues. Returning to our analogy relating to writing a book, there are millions of unwritten books out there, as people are always going to write a book, usually at some point in the future. This point often never arrives, and all these books remain unwritten. Brain assistance. Have you ever noticed that if you have bought a new car or pair of shoes, you pay attention to other cars or people's shoes? This happens because the reticular activating system has been activated. The RAS is a cluster of cells located at the base of the brain that process sensory information related to the things that need our attention right now. The RAS is aware of what we are paying attention to at any moment in time and focuses only on information related to it. We can use this knowledge knowing that if we are focusing on information related to our goals, then it can help us. This can also work in a negative way too. If we have just broken up with someone, then all we see are couples everywhere enjoying themselves. Our brain plays tricks on us constantly. We can use the tricks to our advantage and not our disadvantage. Excellent, because people generally just say, if we go back to, I think it's last week, and the strategy of being the board instead of being the pawn on the chessboard or whatever piece, and if something happens, you are removed from the situation and say, hey, look what's happened here, rather than, oh, look what's happened to me. I've always found that really difficult. But here we've gone another step to beat that challenge, to win that challenge. We turn it into a goal setting exercise, using goals to eliminate the negative thinking, which activates our RAS, our reticular activating system, to focus on not the negative thoughts. So you'll have to customize your goal. I think that's excellent. End of the day, it all takes work. Alright, this is Gino from Otherworld Connections, and thank you for tuning in to Revolution.radio, the #1 listener-supported radio station in the world. So please help support our efforts and airtime by visiting the station's donations section on our website, Revolution.radio. Thank you very much. Okay, we are getting a little unhinged here. Messages from the she. Destroying the ego. To become aware of your ego, a creative partnership is required between creative imagination and difficulties or oppression. What the heck does that mean? I decided to keep this in here because, hey, this is candid. This is a reading. All the readings are legit, like they're just what comes out. And this is a challenge for me. But here we go. So to be aware of your ego, so you have to be aware of something to do something about it, right? So that's the step to destroying the ego. And in my opinion, this means more about, what am I trying to say? Destroying the ego, destroying the inauthentic. All right? And being authentic. And that's pushing that ego out of the way. But being aware of it, it's obviously something you don't get rid of completely because we all need our ego. But I think this is about separating, being aware of it, right? Okay, because it says, so a creative partnership is required between creative imagination and difficulties or oppression. So, creative imagination, so for some reason I think that means like thinking creatively on the spot when you're facing difficulties or you're being oppressed by somebody. That's my first thought. So I want to look at, and part of this reading involves, being pointed in the direction of other information to back it up, and we're looking at Self and Others by R.D. Laing. Okay, so I just read this one little bit. A boy of 7 had been accused by his father of having stolen his pen. He vigorously protested his innocence, but was not believed, possibly to save him from being doubly punished as a thief and a liar. His mother told his father that he had confessed to her that he had stolen the pen. However, the boy still would not admit to the theft, and his father gave him a thrashing for stealing and lying twice over. As both his parents treated him as though he both had done the deed and had confessed it, he began to think that he could remember having actually done it after all. And he was not even sure whether or not he had in fact confessed. His mother later discovered that he had not in fact stolen the pen, and admitted this to the boy, without, however, telling his father. She said to the boy, "Come and kiss your mummy and make it up." He felt in some way that to go and kiss his mother and make it up with her in the circumstances was somehow twisted. Yet the longing to go to her, embrace her, and be at one with her again was so strong as to be almost unendurable. Although he could not articulate the situation clearly, he stood his ground without moving towards her. She then said, "Well, if you don't love your mummy, I'll just have to go away," and walked out of the room. The room seemed to spin. The longing was unbearable, but suddenly everything was different, yet the same. He saw the room and himself for the first time. The longing to cling had gone. He had somehow broken into a new region. He was alone. Could this woman be connected to him? As a man, he thought this incident crucial in his life. A deliverance, but not without a price to pay. All right, so this situation here is terrible. It's really bad. A boy of 7, this happening to him, and also at 7 when you become individuated. Anyway, I deeply resent these kind of things. But, the point here is a creative partnership being required between creative imagination and difficulties or oppression. And I'm starting to suspect, based on the last few weeks, that the response to situations like this, okay, we're not children, but the boy's 7, so he's individuated. The response we have to that comes up in our mind when things like this happen to us. This is what the fairies want us to do, want us to use, whatever the idea is. And same with the angels, actually, and these messages that have been coming up. Now, sometimes that response in the mind is pretty extreme. But if people are taking your rights away, if people are treating you horribly, then in a natural world, without rulers, government, rules, police, then you would be right to do the thing that naturally came to your mind, to take action. Now, I'm not encouraging you to go out and cause extreme harm to people. What I mean is, this boy here, the best he could do was nothing. And it was not without a price to pay. Well, good on him for being like, nah, stuff that. I'm not going to accept that it's all my fault when it's not. And you guys get to just sweep it under the rug, because he's setting himself up as the life of a scapegoat. And there is a price to pay, because they were like, okay, we'll stuff you then. And so the man thought this incident crucial to his life. Yes, it was, because he stood up for himself, and his life possibly could have taken a different turn where, with the people close to him, it became accepted to just treat him like a doormat. And maybe they continued to, but at least he knew that he could say no. And the price to pay was, however they decided to treat him after that for doing such a thing. Now, I think the point here is taking action. Whatever, because a partnership, so partnership speaks to doing, taking action. Okay, so yeah, there we go. So in the moment when you're being treated badly, don't let it slide. But what do? You don't know what to do. Well, you do, because the response comes into your mind, the idea of what to do in the moment. And you need to take action on that. And that really is a message for me. So I'm just being honest, I'm not saying it as a guru. I'm saying it as a, like, hey, let's try and work on this together. Or you let me know. You give me some tips, right? Okay. So yeah, that's it. And where does the ego come into that? The ego comes into that with, well, that's your ego telling you what to do, right? So you need to work with that and pay the price, because there's always going to be a price to pay, cause and effect. That is a natural law principle. So there's always going to be a price to pay. So in these situations, you should be using your ego. You should be using your creative imagination, whatever comes to your mind, to deal with these difficulties. And the more you do that, the more you become aware of your genuine self and your not genuine self being your ego. That's the tip there. Pretty deep, but we did it. Okay, on to Hive Mind with 10 minutes left in the show. We're going to look at dun 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 Mirror Meditation. Mirror Meditation. A book by Dr. Tara Well from 2022. And you can check that out on mirrormeditation.com. So mirror meditation, also known as soul scrying, also known as shadow work. So I'm just going to read a bit from there. Why is self-talk so powerful? Imagine walking down the street and seeing someone walking alone talking to themselves. You'd probably try to avoid them. Sometimes talking to oneself is thought to be the habit of eccentrics or a signal of mental instability. Yet the truth is we all talk to ourselves. Have you ever been caught talking to yourself by a friend or family member? It can be embarrassing. Oh my gosh. Is it what? I'm talking to myself right now in a way. No, I'm talking, well, there's Willow. So I'm talking to you, Willow. Not about you. Consider that you have an inner dialogue that's constantly running. Occasionally you may accidentally blurt something out, but for the most part, this inner conversation happens in your head. Our self-talk has a tremendous impact on our physical, emotional, and mental well-being. Why? Because it's our thoughts, right? It's our thoughts turned into action. Yet you may disregard it, or at least underestimate its impact. You can use the mirror to explore your self-talk, saying your self-talk aloud as a regular part of the mirror meditation practice. In this section, we'll look at various forms of self-talk and experiment with some exercises, blah, blah, blah. Observing yourself in the mirror or on video creates a way to externalize your inner dialogue to see it from a different perspective. Yes, I realize this may seem strange to see yourself talking to yourself. Self-talk sounds like self-criticism, self-judgments, and berating ourselves for mistakes or imperfections. With the mirror, you can face your inner critic or critics, as many of us have more than one critical voice. Running out of time here, so I'm trying to skip through. Alright, so benefits. Self-talk can enhance your cognitive performance. Self-talk may help your brain perform better. Okay, some scientific evidence there. Psychologists find that the beginning... I don't like scientific evidence, in case you haven't noticed. But you know what I mean? Because it's like, okay, yeah, because the scientific evidence. Okay, so I'm just telling you, there's scientific evidence to back up that self-talk may help your brain perform better, okay? So believe it. You're going to have faith, because you've got to have faith to know that it's true. That's Manly P. Hall, right? You got to have faith. If you don't have faith, you're not going to try it, so you're not going to know that it's true or not for yourself anyway. So what is scientific evidence going to do? Psychologists find that the beginning of self-talk in toddlerhood is associated with learning new motor skills. Talking aloud when the mind is not wandering is a sign of superior cognitive functioning. So self-talk can make you intellectually competent. There may be some truth in the images of mad scientists talking to themselves, lost in their inner world of ideas. Willow said, called foot-in-mouth syndrome sometimes. I'm going to look that up. Thank you, Willow. I've never heard of that before. Okay, self-talk can boost your self-confidence. Words of encouragement nurture self-confidence and self-esteem and increase chances for success. So there are all these activities in the book. Self-talk can help you manage negative emotions. You can also use self-talk to talk yourself down when you're in an upsetting situation. Self-talk. Self-talk, self-talk, self-talk. So I'm just checking where I'm at. Okay. Self-talk is most beneficial when it serves a purpose or is goal-focused. So here are the goals again. Okay, so we can incorporate this into our goal setting and trying to achieve what we want to achieve. All right, uncovering the inner nurturer. You may discover that you have different voices inside yourself. Some are kind and nurturing, hopefully. Hopefully. Okay, so how can we be realistic about ourselves and set the balance right? Okay, being realistic about ourselves, because true hardcore shadow work would be to sit in front of the mirror and just be honest with yourself. And being honest with yourself is being a critic, right? And also, if you're not doing things effectively or as well as you could be, or you're doing things that you don't like about yourself, then you are being harsh to yourself, right? I'm glad it said this in this book, because we have to be a little bit hard on ourselves, but it's about balance as well, right? So it is a kind of nurturing, acknowledging and accepting the things we do that are wrong, and I think that is the key to looking in the mirror and facing yourself. That's what I think. But this book will give you the nice and nurturing things that you can do as well. Okay, there are some tried and true techniques to strengthen the inner nurturer and tame the inner critic. Soon we'll use the mirror to get the voices out of your head where you can see them and work with them from a new perspective. So changing perspective, it's kind of looks like we're taking that step back again. We're being the chessboard rather than the chess piece. We are putting the things we want to change about ourselves into our goal setting. So we're taking a step back, and the thing that we want to change, it's a goal on a bit of paper. So we're kind of being that chessboard again. Okay, let's have a look. Well, you can choose to see yourself the way others see you, as essentially good and worthy. This might be hard to do. You may feel that it is taboo or too self-indulgent. So, this show really is for all people out there that would feel like that. Literally. This is what I do the show for. This is why I do the show. Maybe even narcissistic. But why not let yourself feel your goodness? If it's all right to see basic goodness in others, and it's all right for them to remember it in you, why is it not all right to acknowledge it inside yourself? There we go. Okay, we are out of time. So go look in that mirror. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks, everybody. Much love. Bye.